Welcome to Even Tacos Fall Apart, a podcast where we get real and talk about the messy side of mental health. I'm your host, MommaFoxFire, and in today's episode, we'll be exploring the topic of hypnotherapy and its potential benefits for anxiety, trauma, and depression. Hypnotherapy is a form of therapy that uses guided relaxation, intense concentration, and focused attention to achieve a heightened state of awareness that is sometimes called a trance. In this state, a person is more receptive to suggestions and can access the deeper layers of their mind, which can help them address a variety of mental and physical health concerns. In this episode, we'll be talking to Mahesh Grossman, an expert in the field of hypnotherapy. We'll be exploring how hypnotherapy can alleviate symptoms of anxiety, trauma, and depression, and how it can be used in combination with other therapies to achieve even better results. Whether you're curious about hypnotherapy or looking for new insights into managing anxiety, trauma, or depression, I hope this episode will provide valuable information and inspiration. So sit back, relax, and let's explore the fascinating world of hypnotherapy. Because even when tacos fall apart, there's always hope for a better tomorrow. Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to another Mental Health Monday. Really excited for our guest tonight. We're going to be talking about hypnotherapy for anxiety, trauma, and depression with Mahesh Grossman. So Mahesh, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we do have a question queue if you have questions as we're going. I know that there were some questions asked in the Discord ahead of time. We will make sure to include those as well. But if you have questions as we're going, you can type !Q, follow it with your question, and then that'll put it into a question queue. We'll make sure that it gets asked while we're live here. And while we are gearing up to start talking about our topic for the night, let me just introduce Mahesh here. So Mahesh Grossman is a somatic hypnotherapist who specializes in healing anxiety, depression, and trauma, as well as managing chronic pain. He's the author of the 1-Minute Anxiety Solution and the creator of the Defy Trauma course, which features his 5-step trauma detox process. His unique approach to healing through hypnosis starts with connecting to and releasing the leftover emotional tension we hold in our body and using that as a tool to discover and break free of the root cause that keeps us stuck in bad habits like smoking or overeating, or in difficult mental patterns like anxiety and depression. And I have a couple of social links for you. I'm also going to give you the website for the 1-Minute Anxiety Solution and for the Defy Trauma course. So if y'all are looking for more information on our guest tonight, here are a couple ways you can find that information. So thank you guys so much for being here. Again, we're going to be talking about hypnotherapy for anxiety, trauma, and depression. So to start us off, Mark has already entered a question into the question queue, and she asks, what is your favorite poem?
Okay, my favorite poem is by Rumi. It's called Muhammad and the Huge Eater. And it tells the story of a guest that visits Muhammad, winds up at Muhammad's house, eats enough for 7 people, and the wait staff is, his servants are so upset with this person that they lock him in his bedroom. Oh. So he dreams of crapping in his bed and the blankets, and sure enough, he actually does. Muhammad is kind enough to, and he tries to get out, and the door is locked. But Muhammad is kind enough to invisibly unlock the door. He goes out, and in the meantime, everybody sees what's going, sees the terrible state of the bedroom. And Muhammad says, I'm going to be washing this bedding. And the staff is horrified, but he says no. And the man, meanwhile, left an amulet at Muhammad's place, and he comes back for the amulet. Amulet sees Muhammad washing his crappy bed sheets and bedding, starts weeping immediately. Mm-hmm. And Muhammad, and it transforms him so that he suddenly is able to fill instead of the God-shaped hole in his heart, as Pema Chodron would say, with God instead of food. And this beautiful transformation takes place. Totally makes me cry. Well, not anymore, but after the first 30 times, it made me cry. The 31st time, it didn't.
Yeah.
It wore off.
That's the way sometimes you read something enough and it's kind of like, okay, I'm not going to cry at this anymore. Well, that sounds like a great poem. So I did put a link there. If anybody wants to read that, you're welcome to go and read that poem. We had someone just recently, I think it was one of the therapy twins, and I can't remember if it was Joan or Jane, but their favorite poet was Rumi as well. And that was, it's fun to have somebody come up again and again. It's really neat to me.
Yeah, that's good.
Can you tell us a little about your experiences and what made you become interested in specializing in hypnosis and mental health?
Well, I guess two things. I started off. I had already, I've done all this therapy myself, and I trained with my therapist on how to do psychodrama, and with a bunch of other people who were getting their therapy degrees. But I had, spent 300 hours with this guy probably, so I was better than anybody else because I had 300 hours of private lessons. Except, I didn't know how to do it, but I knew what it was like. And at some point, I wanted to do my own group. And this woman in my meditation group said, "Hey, you better worry. You got to worry about the California Psychology Board is coming after people, even when you don't say you're a psychologist. You need some kind of whatever, some kind of certification or something."
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at the law, and the law said the only exception for working with your subconscious, besides therapists, were hypnotherapists.
Oh.
And I said, well, let me check that out. And when I checked it out, I was like, wow, the things I can do already when you hypnotize somebody beforehand, when they're in a trance state beforehand, they work even better.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and hypnosis was a relatively easy thing to get certified in. And I took to it like a duck to water. So, and I was able to, and I picked a school where they gave you a lot of freedom to add everything you already knew
Mm-hmm.
into the process. And so that's how I became a hypnotherapist. And of course,
Interesting. So it's kind of the path of least resistance to get to where you wanted to be?
Yeah, and it turned out I had this real gift. And amazing things happen.
Yeah. That's really cool. I like that. What is your favorite thing about working in this field, and what are some of the biggest challenges that you've found?
Well, my favorite thing is you can get instant transformation with someone over really profound things. I had a woman who, her husband had been murdered at work 20 years prior, and she'd been depressed for 20 years. And I have this process where you kind of open where you find what it is you're squashing about yourself. It's based on what's called the soul retrieval, but I always thought that was a terrible name because it's not really true. But it is true that we squash when trauma happens to us. We squash parts of ourselves. So this woman, when she opened the present, she got rubies, and one of the questions I like to ask is, ask the rubies if they need anything from you in order to stay with you forever. And the rubies, of course, represent love and all these other things. And she said, well, they said I need to allow love in. And she said, I said, are you willing to do that? And she said, no. And I love no. No is awesome because it's, wherever you have resistance is where you have to do some work. So I have this kind of 5-step Defy Trauma process, and I took her through the steps that help you heal whatever it is holding you back. And with that process, she was willing to allow love in. And at the end of the session, she was wonderfully relaxed, the way everybody is, but I didn't think anything of it. And she came to my sessions dressed in what you'd wear on laundry day. Mm-hmm. That's what she looked like. It was like the last possible clothes you could wear on laundry day. And the next week, she came back totally put together with a really nice sense of color. And she said to me she had dinner with her son, who was 29. Mm-hmm. So she'd been depressed since he was 9 years old. He said, Mom, I don't recognize you. She was an entirely different person.
Wow.
Because depression, we think of what a tongue depressor is, right? Tongue depressor holds down your tongue. Depression is something that's holding you down, holding you back, something you're cutting off from yourself. And so that was that's one of the things that kind of happens. I've had things. A guy got over his fear of being touched by his wife, in one session. I actually show that session in my Defy Trauma course. You actually get to see him go through the process, and years later, he continued to be able to be held by his wife, and it had nothing to do with abuse.
Mm-hmm.
It was completely unrelated. It related to his lack of trust in his father, and it healed him, and it changed their marriage. I mean, they had a good marriage in every other way, but he would hold his breath. He wouldn't hold his breath, but he'd count to 10 while she hugged him, and then let go, just to give her 10 seconds worth of affection. So, and now they cuddle all the time, apparently.
That's
those
awesome.
Things
Yeah,
that I love about this work. The hardest thing is, and this is going to sound weird, I'm an empath, which means I feel what's going on in other people's bodies. And when we do a session together, this field forms between us. And I've been doing my own inner work for 37 years. So the people I work with pick up on, like, they can lift 200 pounds with me instead of 50 pounds that they might work with someone else or on their own work, because it's just the comfort that I have in these places, going to these places inside myself, becomes part of them. But on their end, the other thing is that when you release emotions in these situations, your body is actually releasing. I work a lot with the body. The body will yawn or burp, or the stomach will growl, or you'll have little muscle spasms, or if there's something you can't express or not quite ready to express, you'll start coughing to unblock what it is you want to express. What happens on my end is, because this field forms between us, I will burp in every single session. I will burp out emotions. I have to tell clients this before each session. It's very strange. But I burp, and people feel better after I burp. People, like, if somebody has a lot of anger and I start burping a lot, they suddenly feel better. They didn't even have to do anything. It's very strange. But there's this healing thing that happens, this healing, I don't know what... I guess they call it some kind of I can be, the deeper somebody goes, the more exhausted I am after a session.
Yeah. So
I often take a nap after a session. So I can only see 2 or 3 people a day because of this. So that's irritating sometimes.
I would imagine, the transformations that you get to witness are incredible, I'm sure. But then just the drain of it all is, it sounds like that's a big deal for you. But it's good that you're able to, take that time between sessions and take a nap if you need to. That's great.
Yeah, I have no choice.
Yeah. Your body's just like, you're done for the day. That's it. You gotta stop. Yeah. Do you have a serial killer or true crime story that fascinates you?
Well, it's just an interesting story. It wasn't a serial killer, but friends of mine were watching TV when the Gerald Ford was being shot. And Gerald Ford was shot, and then I guess they apprehended the person, and one looked to the other and they said, "Oh my God, it's Sarah." And they were friends with the woman who shot Gerald Ford. And then I guess there's this musical called Assassins, where she has a song where she sings about Charlie. And then there's John Hinckley simultaneously sings about Jodie Foster and his assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan. So those are my true crime. I watch Criminal Minds all the time, but those are fiction.
Yes. Yeah, I love Criminal Minds. It's one of my favorite shows to sit down and watch, especially with my 16-year-old, because he likes that kind of thing too. He actually wants to be an FBI agent when he grows up. So
wow.
So it's one of those, like, sure, this isn't super realistic, but what a cool way to kind of connect and everything.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and there was an attempted assassination on him multiple times, right? I mean, that was before my time.
Yeah, I was not before my time, but I don't remember anymore. But yeah, it seems like there was more than one.
Yeah. It's so weird that it's just like, hey, I know that person.
Yeah, that's the strangest thing you could ever.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we're here tonight to talk about hypnotherapy for anxiety, trauma, and depression. So, if we can start with the fundamentals, just what is hypnotherapy? How does it impact your brain? Kind of what signals does it send to your body during the process? If you can outline that for us.
Well, I can outline it to the extent that the way I work.
Yes.
So first off, most people are pretty hypnotizable because hypnosis is a normal state. So if you're the type of person who reads a novel and it says she saw a gray rock castle with a cherry red door, and you see that gray rock castle with a cherry red door, guess what? You've been hypnotized by little black splotches of ink are telling you what you are affecting what you see in your head. Now it does. You don't have to be visual. When I watched The Client, I read The Client by John Grisham, heard Whoopi Goldberg the entire book, went to see Susan Sarandon in the role, who got the role in the movie, and for half an hour I was pretty disturbed by the whole thing because it wasn't Whoopi Goldberg.
Right.
But also, just if you see something, if you watch a movie and it makes you happy when the main character is happy and sad when the main character has bad things happen, you're being hypnotized because this is not real, and you know it's not real. But there's this part of you that's connected to it. The other thing to know is that. If hypnosis is a combination of imagination and concentration. So if somebody plays video games and doesn't hear their name being called, or read a book and doesn't hear their name being called, they're being hypnotized. Or if you miss your stop on the freeway because you're lost in thought, you're being hypnotized by your own thought. So it's super natural, not supernatural, but super natural.
Yes.
And I'm not a big science guy. There's studies, the MRIs at Stanford in August of 2016 said it connects to boy, it's on my website at berkeleyhypnosis.com if you some description of some of this stuff. But what's really happening is, to me, you're connecting to your subconscious mind. You're in this relaxed state. So you're more suggestible because of the relaxed state. But also it doesn't even have to be suggestions. If we can get you connected to your subconscious mind, you suddenly have access. To me, you have access to what's called implicit memory. Mm-hmm. And implicit memory is the stuff that was overwhelming to your explicit memory, your normal memory. And there's stuff in your body that's stuck. There's emotion that's stuck. There's physical tension that's stuck. You have subconscious negative self-beliefs that are stuck. And this is where, this is the stuff I specialize in with anxiety, trauma, and depression, which, goes into weight loss too. Because weight loss and stop smoking, it goes into those things too. Because there's old things that happen to us and we don't want to feel what's going on. But they are totally stuck in your body. My favorite way to work, and I work other ways too, but about 85% of the time, if you come to me with it for a session, and let's say we're dealing with anxiety, or let's make it weight loss to make it slightly more interesting. With weight loss, you think of a time you ate something that however we eat, whatever. Yeah, everybody has different ways of overeating. But whatever your way of overeating is, you go and you think of a time you overate. Mm-hmm. And you think of the moment just before you did whatever your version of that was, whether it's a treat thing or you just kept eating when you were full. So, and then you ask yourself, notice the sensation, notice the feeling in your body. And as you're about to do it, and then where do you feel that in your body? And then how old were you the first time you had that sensation in your body? Mm-hmm. With anxiety, it's I'm using weight loss because it's just easy. I just had a weight loss client, and also it's just a little more interesting than just when you get anxious. Notice where you feel that in your body. Mm-hmm. And how old were you that first time? It's a little, right. There's that extra step of remembering the incident, because you could do it with smoking, you could do it with the desire to use porn or whatever, the different things that we use to not feel. But when you notice that sensation in your body, you can ask yourself how old you are the first time you have that sensation. And this is a great thing to do when you're triggered also. And when you and then you ask, sometimes you don't know. So it's like, were you 10 or under, or 11 and older? And then you keep splitting the difference. Eventually you come to an age. And then, were you home? Were you at school? Or who were you with? Where were you? What was happening? What were you sad, mad, or scared?
Mm-hmm.
And then I have these fill in the blank sentences. There are three of them. Well, two of them really. Is blank, it really hurt me when you blank. Or screw you, blank, you don't get to blank. And that's a good one for anger, except I use the F word. So,
Mm-hmm.
because it's more powerful for anger. It
Yep.
helps you connect to it. And here's the interesting thing that happens. So let's say mom was critical, and mom, it really hurt me when you criticize me all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Mom only lives inside your head, right? She's not there. She's just, there's this mom inside your head, or dad, or whatever. But mom will respond not with, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I love you. You're a great kid. I never should have done that," which is what we want her to do at the end of the process. Mom is going to respond with, "Well, I needed to keep you in line so that you could whatever," or "That's how my mother treated me," or whatever. Mom always 100% of the time makes an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
And then part of what I do is I take people through a process where we get mom to be loving, where we get your inner mom to say everything you wanted to say. And suddenly there's this really profound peace. And you go to the scene of wanting let's say it's a piece of cake. That's the easiest one to come up with. And you don't want that piece of cake anymore. It's a really profound thing, and it leads to other healing. Now, the other thing I really like to do, and this comes from my training in psychodrama, is sometimes we have a mom or a dad, a client who had a rageaholic father, could never, ever imagine him saying, "I'm sorry, I love you, you're a great kid, I never should have done that." So we use what I call the understudy method. And the understudy is somebody who plays the role of your parent, and you get to say, and they're a good version, but you get to say, "Screw you, dad, you don't get to blank." And instead of your dad, we use like Tom Hanks.
Mm-hmm.
And when you say that to Tom Hanks, because in your mind you've got Tom Hanks associated with all these sweet and kind things, because he's usually that kind of character. Tom Hanks will say, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I never should have done that. You're a great kid, and you didn't deserve that, and you deserve all the love in the world." And it changes a channel in you. It changes a setting in you,
Mm-hmm.
and it brings you more peace. Now, different things. We may have, more than one event or more than one pattern that we have to deal with. But that's a large part of how the process works. And then at the end of everything, we do the birthday present thing. And so you're taking stuff out, and then you're putting good stuff in. And that's kind of my overall way of working with people. There's lots of coloring outside the lines, because not everybody's the same. And sometimes there's all kinds of there's resistance. It's like, it's not okay. Your 5-year-old says, "Hey, it's not okay for me to feel anger." And then we talk to the 5-year-old, and ask the 5-year-old if it's tired of the job of protecting you from your emotions. And sometimes the 5-year-old will say, "Yeah, but it's not okay with mom or dad, whatever." And then we talk to them, and so eventually we're healing your inner system.
Mm-hmm.
And this heals kind of the core wounds under anxiety, trauma, depression, bad habits, workaholism, all kinds of things.
Yeah. That's really neat. So I want to, because I know one of our viewers in particular has trouble. you gave the example of the Grey Rock Castle with the red door, and being able to imagine it, and kind of like that being a hypnotizable person, right? So if
Mhm.
someone has trouble picturing things in their mind or connecting with what they're reading, like they can read it, they can comprehend it, but the imagination part is not there. They can't picture. If you say, pretend I'm holding a ball, in no way, shape, or form can they pretend you're holding a ball. They just have to put it in their head. All right, they want me to pretend that they're holding a ball. Is that a problem?
Well, yeah, maybe. It depends. Sometimes you can go with another sense. So, I mean, my hypnosis teacher couldn't see anything.
Mm-hmm.
She had been doing hypnosis for 40 years. And so we worked with sound and we worked with smell and we
Ah,
worked
okay.
with sound in particular, with sensation. And for me, it's like the sensation in the body, right? I
Mm-hmm.
always, I have a workaround if you can't get the sensation in the body, but that's more visual. But it depends. And it could be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on, if you can get one of the other channels working, great. If you can connect to the sensation in your body and get answers that way, great. Um, if you can have kind of a knowing of the answer. I had a client who never saw anything, but he just kind of knew. He just kind of knew the experience was happening.
Mm-hmm.
So that works for them. And it depends. And there are people, there's like, I forget what it's called, but 5% of people just cannot imagine visually.
Yep. Yeah, there
One
is.
of the
There is.
things,
There's a term for that.
yeah, and I looked, I knew it once, but I'm
What's it?
64.
Anaph
Where'd something
anaph
go?
aphasia? Wait, hold on.
It's not
No,
aphasia,
not
but you're in the
aphasia. It's
ballpark.
something. Yeah, it's something like that.
Aphasia has
Here.
to do with speech, but it's something very similar to that. And sometimes people aren't connected to their body, and they can't feel they think they can't feel sensation in their body. But I have a little exercise we can do with everybody right now. They're all going to hate me afterwards, but because I was on the phone with this guy, and he didn't feel bad about movies when bad things happened. He never missed his stop. But he's on the phone with me because he wanted to. He would get itchy from dialysis,
Mm-hmm.
and he wanted to not get itchy. And on his days off, he wouldn't get itchy. But what happened was during the conversation, we were talking about itchiness so much he didn't realize it, but he was hypnotized by the conversation about itchiness he felt really itchy, and he never felt itchy
I already
on the
feel
Tuesdays
itchy.
and
Like
Thursdays.
that's
Yeah,
I
so
constantly
you're super
yeah.
hypnotizable. So what I ask people to do if they don't think they connect to their body is just see if you can notice a place where you itch.
Hmm. I've
And
got
I've
like
never had
three right
anyone
now.
not succeed. The worst thing for me was I created this quiz on how hypnotizable you are, and one of the questions was about that. And I had to look at I looked for pictures because you put a picture of and there's all these people who itch. Oh my God! I almost threw myself off the bridge. I itched so much just from looking at that. But
Yep.
here's the thing: if you can notice a place where you itch, then you can connect to your body and see if you can notice a place where you feel tense.
Mm.
And I was doing this on a TikTok live with a guy who said he didn't whatever, and he said, "Oh, my head," and I said, "Okay." Well, and then because I'm an empath, and even though there were lots of people and I knew it was him, I just felt this tension in my stomach. I said, "Well, I'm feeling tension in my stomach, and I think it's yours." He said, "Oh yeah, my stomach's tense. My stomach's so tense all the time that I don't even notice that it's tense anymore."
Mm-hmm.
So we can connect to you. I mean, I did a post on this once, and all these people said, "Yeah, I thought I was dissociated from my body, but if you ask if you ask me to notice where I itch, it works."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like um my oldest is trans female to male, and so he used to be in Girl Scouts, and we had a couple of lice scares in the troop. And boy, as soon as any of the moms started talking about lice, I'd be like, "Oh, now my whole head itches." So
Oh,
I
you
don't know
poor
if
thing.
I don't know if I'm extra sensitive to that or
Well,
what, but yeah, I mean,
you're hypnotized. That's a very hypnotizable thing,
mm-hmm, yeah,
right? As soon as the thought comes in your head, you become You're
Yeah, no,
hypnotized by
that's.
your kid.
I don't
So
know.
you
I don't know if it's just that itchiness part that is for me,
no,
but
no.
boy, that just,
I
I
bet.
mean,
Do you read novels?
oh yeah, I read all the time, and
And
I have a great ability, like great imagination. I can picture stuff when I'm trying to do meditations and everything. I can picture
yeah, well, that's
whatever
all
white
signs of.
light, and yeah,
Yeah, that's super hypnotizable.
yeah, yeah.
I'm finding that
Aphantasia, yes.
I'm finding almost all the podcast hosts I'm on with are really hypnotizable. I don't know what
Interesting.
I don't know what the correlation is, but
Yeah, that's interesting. I would be interested in finding out more about why that is. What is it about podcast hosts in particular? Oh, but who knows? So I mentioned meditation, but how does hypnotherapy compare with something like meditation? Are they similar to one another, but just more focused in a different direction?
well, they're really, really close. In fact, the first time I went to a hypnotherapist for weight loss myself, I was so dreadfully disappointed because I was expecting this really profound trance that was very different. But, what you're doing is you're connecting to your subconscious mind. And that is that happens in meditation. You're going for aha moments, right? In meditation, you get these aha moments. You get these awarenesses of things that you didn't, you get little messages, whatever, when you meditate. Not all the time, obviously, but hypnosis is more directed. Depending on your style of meditation. If your style of meditation is guided visualizations, well, guess what? There's probably no difference between that and hypnosis,
Hmm.
right? Picture a beautiful place and, here's the waterfall and it's blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, hypnosis, we think hypnosis is a special category, but it's normal as a heck. And B, we've been exposed to it in so many different ways. Now, the most hypnotizable person I ever worked with was a woman who came to me because she'd had gastric bypass surgery, but she was drinking 7 Coca-Colas a day,
Oh my
which is
gosh.
not a good thing to do after
No.
gastric bypass surgery. And so we did all this stuff, and there's this thing called rehearsal, where you rehearse a day without whatever it is you're trying to get rid of. And so I talked to her in 3 minutes. We went through, nighttime to waking up in the morning, and we got to 5 o'clock, and I swear, I don't even think it was 3 minutes. She started crying. She felt so deprived by imagining going through an entire day without Coca-Cola that she started falling apart. And we came up with a
Wow.
solution that worked. And she was down to 2 Coca-Colas the next week because she was afraid of giving up all that caffeine, at one time. And then I never saw her again, so I'm assuming she was able to get off Coca-Cola
Hmm.
for good. So that's the most hypnotizable, but you don't really need to be that deeply. I work with people. I want them to be able to answer questions, and I want them to hear me.
Hmm.
And on occasion, I had a woman who came to me for sciatica and neuropathy, and we got rid of her neuropathy. We got rid of her sciatica down to a dime in one session. And at the end of that session, she had also gotten rid of her neuropathy. It was the most amazing thing. I watched her go upstairs the week before, one step, like 2 steps at a time because of the neuropathy. Then I walked her, and she had a cane and stuff also. She had other problems, but she went up 8 steps at a time instantaneously after that session from the neuropathy. When
Wow.
she came back for another session, she said, I want to really be in a deeper trance. So don't have me talk. Just, if you have to ask me questions, we do this, raise your finger for yes and don't raise it for no. And we did it, and she was in a really deep trance. And I talked to her years later, and her neuropathy, and not her sciatica, was completely gone from the session.
Wow.
But that was more of a deeper trance. But you don't really need to go that deep to
Hmm.
have really profound change. All the things with the big things I talked about with, fear of touch and depression, those were kind of a normal state. Not normal, but not super deep. They remembered everything that happened. I mean, as much as you would remember out of an hour from any conversation. So, but it's just as effective.
Yeah.
And sometimes more effective because you get feedback.
Right. What are some indications that hypnotherapy could be beneficial for someone?
Well, generally, I mean, I think it's beneficial for most people. So there's that. But, if you can, in my case, if you can notice where you feel tension in your body, then hypnotherapy is great. If you don't have childhood memories, hypnotherapy is great. If you find yourself behaving, for me, what I do is really about finding the core wound underneath whatever's not working in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're a people pleaser, if you are getting in relationships with people who aren't good for you, if you're incredibly critical of yourself, all these things are you're hypnotizing yourself negatively. So hypnosis will be great for you. If anything with anxiety, if you're a worrier, if you're kind of get into worry loops, that's hypnosis, right? You're hypnotizing yourself to believe something that isn't true. So you're incredibly hypnotizable. So if you worry a lot, you're going to do great with hypnosis. You're picturing the worst possible future. Well, let's use hypnosis to turn that around.
You're already hypnotizing yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Well, we're always hypnotizing ourselves all the time. If you're connected to your body, if you have a sense of like, wow, my stomach feels really tight, but I mean, look, the connection between the mind and the body is so profound and so present. Well, first off, let's talk about sex. We get sexually aroused by our thoughts. That's that's the mind affecting the body. If I ask you to imagine yourself at the top of a roller coaster, just about to go down, you will find that most people tense up and all kinds of other things. I had one guy say, "Oh, I'm not tense at all. I feel excited. I love that stuff." I said, "Well, that's still a mind.
That's a reaction.
You're hypnotized by the thought. Yeah. It's not like everybody else." So,
yeah, that's interesting. It's cool to think about like that especially if you have anxiety or something like that, you're already doing it. You just got to figure out a way to do it the opposite direction. So that's kind of where that comes in.
In certain cases, some of it's at a subconscious level. So the way anxiety works, this is the way anxiety works. So let's say you're a cave person. You're attacked by a woolly mammoth near yellow grass. You survive, but, it was pretty scary. And there's, you process some of it consciously, but some of it still needs processing. You go to dinner at grandma's house, have some nice bison. And afterwards, you walk to the back of grandma's cave, and she's got a painting of a yellow horse on her wall. And you suddenly are ready to fight, flee, or freeze.
Mm-hmm. Because
the color yellow, your brain makes this sloppy pattern match to the yellow of the grass, and you become anxious. And anxiety, if you start sweating and your heart beats faster and your breathing gets difficult. Well, that's because, so your cave brain, or the amygdala, which is another word, which is Greek for almonds. So we have these fancy scientific words that don't mean anything. and are hard to learn and remember. But call it your cave brain. Your cave brain is saying, I want to save their life. And it thinks that you're under attack because there was yellow by the woolly mammoth, and now there's yellow here. So the key is, well, why are we anxious in the first place? Well, there's a core wound. There's a woolly mammoth. We've all had woolly mammoth experiences. And sometimes it's not even what we think. The old hurt isn't even what we understand. I mean, Gabor Mate talks about having been a child during World War II in concentration camps and stuff like that, and his mother having to leave him with another family for 6 weeks. And he took that as a total abandonment because that's, what else? First off, we're infants. We don't know these things.
Right.
But nonetheless, it was a profound wound that affected his life, the rest of his life and to this day. So, but if you can find those core wounds and you can heal them, if you can release the leftover tension that's there in your body, if you can release the leftover emotions that are in your body, if you can change the negative self-beliefs that are in your body. And the way you do that is you don't get critical mom, you get mom to say, I'm sorry, I love you, you're a great kid, blah, 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 instead of, well, that was your fault. You needed, or that's how I was raised. And that's all, because the negative self-beliefs are inside you. Mm-hmm. You can't change them consciously. It's very hard to change the words that you say to yourself. I'm too lazy. Well, you're not too lazy. You've had a lot of trauma and you're processing this trauma. You're in freeze mode because it doesn't feel safe. I had terrible things happen to me on a changing table. And when it's less and I've healed a lot of it, but I still kind of get hyper aroused when I finish something. Because when does a baby get changed? It's when they finish. Mm-hmm. You finish usually the activity ends because they peed or something. So and I've healed a lot of that, and I get a hell of a lot more done than I used to. But I used to be really, really, I didn't know about this stuff. It was running me, and I would be stuck. I wasn't lazy. Nobody likes. I mean, people enjoy doing things. They enjoy work is enjoyable. It depends on what you're doing, but a lot of stuff is pretty enjoyable. But if it feels like you're gonna die, if some part of you that you're not even aware of feels like you're gonna die or have something bad happen to you if you keep working, or if you're just hyper aroused and it's just, if there's something that's not calm, you're going to feel it's going to be hard. You're not procrastinating. You're avoiding pain.
Mm-hmm. I like that. If it's not that you're procrastinating, it's that you're avoiding pain, because it is. I mean, whether you recognize it as avoiding pain or not, that there was some pain in the past. That's why you're procrastinating. That's
absolutely. And also, or you're afraid you're going to get criticized.
Mm-hmm.
You're afraid you're going to fail.
That's still pain. Like, that's still pain.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's because there's old pain from being criticized from a long time ago. Because if being criticized is no big deal if you don't already have a gash on your leg or a bruise on your knee. Being criticized was if you're bumping against a knee that's not hurt. When you're criticized, it's not that big a deal. Mm-hmm. But if criticism from childhood is, a fear of abandonment, ultimately.
Yeah. So I feel like we've talked around this a lot, but this was a community question that was sent ahead of time in the Discord. So I want to just kind of provide it as direct an answer as we can. How does one know whether they would be a good candidate for hypnosis? And is there a way someone can make themselves a good candidate if they are not?
To the second part, I don't think so. To the first part, we've gone over. If you're connected to your body, if you read novels and you see pictures, if you hear voices, if you get caught up in your imagination, if you get caught up in a video game and you can't hear your name, all those things are really
zone in and tune out.
Yeah. If you go, to anxiety123.com, which is actually kind of my link tree kind of thing, So it has all of my everything I have. So you can set up a free consultation with me. You can buy the anxiety book. You can go to the Defy Trauma course. You can also take a quiz on how hypnotizable you are.
Okay.
So, and but it's going to be all the things we talked about. The questions are what we talked about. You already really know the answers. If you've listened to this, you're going to know the answers. You get to itch. Yes. Creativity is also a pretty good sign that you're hypnotizable.
Okay. How long does it take? And we kind of talked about this already, but aside from the, oh my gosh, this person was changed in a single session, outliers, how long does it typically take to notice changes that will continue outside of that moment?
Yeah, it depends on what we're working on and what your background is. But yeah, I typically tell people whatever they want is typically 3 to 5 sessions.
Okay.
There's outliers too. I've had people, 11, 12 sessions. There are people who love the work, right? Because you're healing something every time. When I have people that when people work with me long time, first off, after 3 to 5 sessions, nobody can even deal with coming more than every 2 weeks. The transformation is so powerful each session that it's too much to come every week. It just is. It's like, and sometimes that happens sooner. Sometimes that happens. Well, I've had pain management clients who came more frequently that were taking longer for the pain management to work. But you'll experience something profound in each session. Unless there's nothing there to do. But the people I work with long term, they don't even come to me for anything. I just ask them to notice where you feel tension in your body, and notice how old you were the first time you had that tension, and where were you, what was happening, all the things that we went over in the beginning. But what happens when you do that is something important comes up. And so if you're somebody with trauma, or a lot of trauma, this is the process that, if you do this every couple of weeks, you'll have really profound results. Now, I will tell you that I don't know if I do it every day anymore, but there was a period of 10 years. Well, I didn't develop this process till about 4 or 5 years ago, but I would do this every day. Sometimes you don't even need to know what it is. You just notice the tension in your body, and sometimes it helps to have an answer. But you can also one of the things I love to do is have people imagine there's a fire hose attached to wherever they're feeling the tension. And then picture the Grand Canyon if you're from the United States and you know the Grand Canyon. If you're from somewhere else, whatever it is, some canyon, something with a hole. And let the water pour out of you till it fills up the Grand Canyon. And then drain it if it does. And you can do that instantaneously. And you just keep going till the water drips. Like after you turn off the shower, the water will drip. And I like to have people do that in their throat, in their chest, in their midriff, in their belly. That's something you can do every single day. Or you just do the places where you feel tension if you're more connected to that. I mean, if you can connect to the places that have tension, you don't have to do everything. Just do the places that have tension. You can do this with your eyes closed before you even wake up, while you're holding your partner, with your eyes closed before you even open them at the first point in the day. And I've had days where I woke up depressed, just feeling like life, oh my God, another day. Why? And, the thing to understand is our subconscious mind is working while we're sleeping. So if there's unresolved stuff, it kind of starts, it puts it in the pot, and we need to clean out the pot. Or I don't know if that's the best method, whatever. There's something to clean out in our body, or our chakras, or whatever you want to call them. And so you do this process, and suddenly it's like, oh, I'm fine. This is a normal day. But first, there's stuff. Because, we have dreams. And, if you understand dreams and you're able to interpret them, great. But you don't have to. I mean, I've done the dream interpretation for 30 years. And not all of it, I don't understand all my dreams. But I do understand that I woke up feeling really crappy. like life doesn't matter. And it's fascinating. It's so weird. You do this thing where you just do the fire hose thing, and suddenly you're fine.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was just some old dark stuff that you didn't want to, that was painful, or that made you feel like you didn't want to live it. Or I don't know what. I don't know how that works exactly, but it's just there. There's stuff there that keeps you from wanting, keeps you from your aliveness.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of a self-hypnosis exercise.
Yes, it's something you do completely by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even bother calling it hypnosis.
Yeah.
I call it an exercise. Hypnosis makes it hard. People ask, well, can I hypnotize myself? Let's get rid of I try to avoid the word hypnosis as much as hypnosis gives me credibility.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, just do it.
Yeah.
Don't call it something. Just try it. You can do it. It's so easy. The more advanced version is you unzip those parts of yourself. I call it zipper surgery. I'm the world's foremost zipper surgeon. I'm the only one, but
hey.
But when you let's say you feel let's say in your midriff you feel tension, because that's where I'm picking it up from you. So just notice your midriff. Just imagine unzipping your midriff,
Mm-hmm.
and then close your eyes for a second. And where that tension is, there's something there, and it could be sludge, it could be rocks, it could be snakes, it could be something else. But see if you happen to notice something in there that needs to come out, and let me know what it is.
I mean, not in my midriff, but definitely in my back.
Okay, well, see what it is.
I don't know how I would describe it. I guess maybe rocks. That might be a good one.
Oh yeah, so just you can use it. I tell people to use a shop vac if they know what that is, or a pail, like a plastic pail and shovel, like what you had, or so to just see what happens if you take the rocks out or whatever. Sometimes it is indescribable, but the fact that you're seeing something indescribable.
Yeah, no,
good.
I mean, it's interesting to kind of picture yourself taking something out of that spot. And it does, like where I was feeling that tension, it does feel a little bit better just from picturing that. That's really cool.
Yeah. That's the 2-second version of it. But if you do that in the morning, before you open your eyes, just notice where there's tension. And you can use the fire hose, or you can use the zipper.
Yeah.
Or sometimes do a magician's hat with handkerchiefs, and you pull on the handkerchief, and the handkerchiefs keep going until there's no more left, and then you squish them into a ball and toss them into the sun.
Nice. That's pretty
cool.
cool.
It does relax you, because there is something. The tension is part of what's called implicit memory. Mm. It's caused by something that was overwhelming that you couldn't deal with at the time. Mm. And God knows, even a car accident could do that to you, but or anything that happens as a child. So, it doesn't have to be, big T trauma. It could just be, the number of us who were bullied by other kids, it's a large percentage of us at some time or another, or we're scared by something, or, angry about something. It leaves leftover traces inside us. And in some cases with bigger abuse, it leaves more stuff, but everything is healable.
Yeah. So we have a question in the chat, and it says, if you're familiar with EMDR, it seems to me, a non-professional, that it's kind of similar. What are the differences between hypnosis and EMDR? Thank you for that question.
So I am familiar with EMDR. So one of the things that I found really interesting was I had a therapist I worked with who was on the cutting edge of everything. And just noticing what was going on in my body, I got really brilliant at it. And then when he did EMDR, it was like, oh, this is boring because I have to work so hard to move my eyes back and forth when I can get there just by noticing the sensation in my body. So I like that better. But what I don't like about EMDR is they're really into the story of what happened. A lot of times you're desensitizing yourself to the story of what happened and kind of healing through that. In my model, you don't even, you need a second, not the story per se, but the way, like a snapshot, enough to know that you felt something.
Mm-hmm.
Because all I really care about is the unresolved emotion and the negative self-belief. So you want to just get to the point where Dad, it really hurt me when you yelled at me all the time. Or, screw you, Dad, you don't get to yell at me like that.
Mm-hmm.
You need to know enough to say one of those things. But you don't actually have to go into the story, because Bessel van der Kolk, the well-known best-selling therapist author who's been doing this research, says the real trauma isn't the event that happened to you. The trauma is what happened to you afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
That you weren't given the love. You weren't, believed. You weren't given the love. You weren't, all the things that ought to happen didn't happen to you. I've got a funny story from Cher. So Cher and Meryl Streep saved this woman's life. They were going out for ice cream, and Cher said to Meryl, "Are you sure this is a safe neighborhood?" And she said, "Oh, we're on the border of Chinatown and Little Italy. It's fine." They will go down. They hear this woman screaming. They see this man attacking her, and they decide to run at the man. And he gets scared and runs away. Meanwhile, the woman her clothing is ripped. And I think he was trying to steal her purse or something, but it was like she could have been killed. And suddenly she realizes not only that she's been rescued, but she's been rescued by Meryl Streep and Cher. And she looks and she says, "Oh my God, I'm a singing waitress. And all my friends are everybody I work with is an actor. And they're all going to be so jealous that I was saved by Meryl Streep and Cher." Because the context changed, the lovingness, and also you've got these iconic, people saving you. That changes the meaning of what happened. But let's say you had some kind of abuse happen, and you were blamed for it, or you couldn't tell anybody, it wasn't safe to tell anybody. And that's where the trauma is. There's stuff stuck inside you.
Mm-hmm.
So, so that's what it's really about.
Yeah. It's interesting. I have not ever done EMDR, so I don't know how it is. I've also never done hypnotherapy, so I don't know exactly how that is either. But
We're doing that a little bit now.
Yeah. Well, there you go. But it's if EMDR is kind of focused on what happened, and hypnotherapy is focused on the emotions and the reaction to what happened. I wonder if you could combine them and say, like, okay, we're going to do EMDR and then we're going to follow it with some hypnotherapy. Like, I wonder if that would be effective.
Well, EMDR just puts you into the same state that hypnosis does. It's all one kind of state. So if you're in a visualization mode, that takes you kind of to that state. If you're in a feeling your connection to your body mode, that takes to your state. What I found was when somebody did EMDR with me, I was having the same experience, just getting to it a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's not so much that, EMDR does heal the same things hypnosis does. It just, from what I've seen from other people, I've never done like a solid, I had a little section on EMDR, or we call it bilateral visualization, bilateral stimulation, because the EMDR people only want licensed psychologists doing it, so it can eventually get paid for by health insurance. Yeah. And they're doing all these studies to prove that it works. So it's it's a different world in terms of that, but it's the same thing. Hypnotherapists, you have to understand something. Think of the hypnotist's watch that you've seen in all the movies.
Mm-hmm.
EMDR makes your eyes go right, left, right, left. What does the hypnotist's watch do?
Yep, that's true.
Exactly the same thing. So it's really the same state in terms of their philosophy. And I haven't, been with I haven't studied EMDR in a really profound way. Mm-hmm. But, their thought is you connect to the actual event, And there are people who do hypnosis who do the same thing. But my understanding, after healing all the 37 years of healing my own trauma, and most of which took place during infancy, so it's implicit memory, right? I have no explicit memory of what happened. I thought I had a pretty decent childhood, actually. Before, I mean, there was other stuff, there was plenty of stuff, but this stuff was really insane. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea until it started showing up for me.
Yeah.
And not even on purpose. It just kind of, because when you train your body, you have more access to the implicit memory just all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So shifting to talk about anxiety specifically, your website and your book talks about 1-minute anxiety solutions. Can you give us an example of one of those?
Well, we've already done some. Mm-hmm. So the magician's hat and the fire hose and the unzipper. The zipper's not in my book; that's in the course. But those are really simple things. Breathing mm-hmm. techniques are great. So there's a breathing technique that I call the bee breath, and you just breathe in, and you breathe out, and go buzz. And that does two things. It vibrates. It creates kind of a humming or buzzing sound, which connects to the vagus nerve, which is, I hate all the science. So it's the nerve that makes you feel safe and socially connected. Uh-huh. I find that scientific words get in the way for a lot of people. So it stimulates the vagus nerve, but also we have what's called the rest and digest system, or the parasympathetic nervous system, or the fancy ones. But basically, this is what calms us down after we're if we're in fight, flight, or freeze mode. We can if we can stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, or the rest and digest system, then we can calm down. This is why smokers think they calm down from smoking. Because you know how people say take a deep breath to calm down? That's actually bad advice. That's going to stimulate the sympathetic nerve. A deep breath in is bad advice. Because a deep breath in with a short breath out, that stimulates the fight, flight, or freeze portion of us.
Interesting.
But the long exhale is what keeps that stimulates the rest and digest system. So it's really, really interesting that smokers think that that nicotine raises your heart rate and your blood pressure, but it feels like it's making them calm down. They're doing yogic breathing, though, because they're going...
Right. Yep.
It's a long exhale, and that stimulates the rest and digest system. So that's one. I've gotten more than 500,000 views on social on eye ridge rubbing is what I call it. So it's like, I don't know, is this going to be both audio and visual, or are some people going to listen? Okay, so if you're listening, you're going to touch the part of the bone underneath your eyebrow, and then you're just going to make a letter C around your eye, and then you're going to repeat on the other side. And maybe do this back and forth 3 times, because I am influenced by bilateral stimulation, or EMDR, that if you go back and forth, it stimulates both sides of the brain. But when you do this, it calms people down. People have told me that it stopped a panic attack for them.
Interesting.
So I have like 5 different types of 1-minute anxiety solution, and there are 57 all told on in the book. Yeah. And I'm eventually posting about 100 of them on TikTok and Instagram. So just look for @Mahesh Grow for my TikTok and Instagram. But there's and people have really, really amazing responses to these things.
You know what this one reminds me of? The one with the drawing the C along your kind of eye socket there. It reminds me of the tapping that I had a guest, Kathleen Weber, just recently, and we talked about emotional freedom techniques, and tapping was one of them. And one of the points that you tap was under
right
here. and then one of them was right above your kind of eyebrow bone. So I wonder, like, that seems like that's very connected in with what she was talking about too. So it's neat. It's all the crossover of everything.
Right. Well, there's a pressure point right here that will also lower anxiety, right in the middle of your eyebrows, and right in the center of your head.
Yeah. So it was. All right. Let me see if I can remember all the ones.
Tap. Yeah.
That the tapping was there. It was here, and then under here, and then right here. Like between your nose and your mouth, kind of. And then down here, I think also. That one might not have been.
It's based on acupuncture, right?
Yes.
Tapping and acupuncture are connected. So these are all pressure points that are going to calm you down. So I never thought of doing this as but it would, tapping the mustache place if you're listening, like the center of your.
Yep.
I don't know what that's called. I always wish I did.
There is a term. There's a term for that. It's right where like your lips. It's the little dip in between your nose and your. I don't know what it's called.
in Jewish mythology, there's if you're born without an indentation there, you are like a savior type person.
Oh, interesting.
But having never seen anyone without one.
Yeah, no, I think I've seen people with them with like really pronounced ones.
Right. Watch out, they're evil.
Yep.
So,
So what are some ways, that's kind of like anxiety. What are some ways that hypnotherapy can help with depression?
So depression, for me, when I work with people, it's always about the tongue depressor, right? What are you holding down? And usually there's trauma underneath it. So when you work with depression, you still can go into the body and say, where do you feel the most tension? And you start to work with the trauma things. But also, let's say you don't feel anything. Let's say you feel numb. Then I would ask, well, where do you feel the numbest, right? Where do you feel the most frozen, the most numb? And that would be the entryway into the process. And also the birthday present technique at the end, because that's we squash things about ourselves. When bad things happen, we squash our sense of safety, our willingness to feel love, our creativity, our confidence, all kinds of things, our joy. So this little birthday present technique, which is a really, really tiny condensation of what's called by a soul retrieval by native cultures. And I got trained in how to do a soul retrieval. The way my mind works is, how do we squash things to the small, get all the meat as fast as possible. And that's part of how I work with depression. But the other thing, and this is really fascinating, is we also inherit trauma and get it by osmosis. So if our parents had a really, really awful childhood, or our grandparents went through concentration camps, that gets passed on in the genes. And or by osmosis. Sometimes, you're just hanging around. You're a little infant. Alice Miller said that the infant picks up on the subconscious of the parent. I've got news for you. It lasts much longer than that. I had this fear show up, and I knew it was from when I was 6 years old. And I went through everything that happened to me when I was 6, and there's some difficult stuff, and none of that. And then at some point I just realized that my dad was moving from New York to Baltimore with us, and we were all driving to Baltimore. And he'd never lived away from his parents. And the fear turned out to be his fear. And so that I had an anger management client who we're doing this piece of work, and he's got and he sees this scene of his dad kind of screaming at him at 3 years old, right in his face. And it turned out the anger management wasn't his anger. He was doing his father's anger. The anger was his father's anger. Now, we can't tell that unless we look at that question. We can't tell the difference, because We only have the one body. So whatever we experience in our body, we think is ours. But intuitively, I often will pick up, and sometimes people will know. Well, I'll tell you two versions. Typically, what I know, I'll just ask, and I try not to be too influential. So I just notice whether that feeling belongs to you or someone else.
Mm.
And sometimes they say someone else, and sometimes they say, I don't know. Well, if you're saying I don't know, guess what? If you did know, you know what it feels like to feel something. So that's common and normal. For you to even say I don't know, it's a pretty good indication that you're feeling somebody else's stuff. And I have a technique I use called the magnet technique, which I'll explain in a second. But another way that happened recently, I had to come up with a kind of a new technique. I had a couple of clients who just didn't connect to their body. So we do this thing where you picture a beautiful place, and longer version in hypnosis, but where there's kind of a wall, or kind of there's some object where somebody could be standing behind. And so I ask, sometimes, a lot of times I'll ask, how old is the part of you that whatever we're talking about is? And this woman answered the question, waited for someone to come out. And what came out was not a part of her, but her grandmother. No, her mother. Sorry, her mother. And she had issues with hoarding. And the hoarding was her mother's. And it didn't mean she didn't have some of that herself. But we did the work to release that through working with her mother. And so the simple technique I use is I have people imagine a giant, whoever it is, and everybody should do this with both their parents and all their grandparents, and if they have siblings, maybe siblings, and step-parents, maybe step-parents as well. You just have them imagine them holding a giant magnet. The red magnet with the silver tips. And stuff begins to come out. Sometimes you can see it. It seems more like energy. A lot of times it's really specific stuff, like magnetic filings or rocks or sludge or crap. A woman who had a very critical mother saw knives, daggers coming out. And if the magnet gets full, you have the person toss it in the sun, and then a new one magically appears. And that's one of my ways I work with people to get rid of stuff that doesn't belong to them. But depression can often be someone else. You know what I mean? It's like you can often take in depression from someone else. And, you can't really heal something that belongs to someone else, because it's not yours. So how do you heal it? But you can get rid of it. And I sometimes have to warn people, look, the good stuff that you got from that person, that's not going to go away. We can either put it in a cabinet, or you can just trust it's not going to go away. But we want to get rid of, why should you carry stuff that belongs to them, pain that belongs to them?
Yeah, the good things you want to keep.
Right, yeah.
So you mentioned the birthday present method. What is that?
So with the soul retrieval, you're trying to get something symbolic that represents the quality. So remember the one with the rubies? So what you do is you picture a beautiful place. It has a picnic table. On the picnic table is a beautifully wrapped present, and usually with a soft ribbon. It's very funny. I think I've only had one person with a fake ribbon, the stick-on ribbon. I once had somebody who his first present was an orange and a brown paper shopping bag. And I was like, no, that doesn't count. And sometimes it's something to keep, and sometimes it's something to get rid of. The whole process is really laid out well in my Defy Trauma course, step by step. But the basics, the object represents something, and it represents something you let go of. I had a bald client who got the hairbrush he used when he had a mullet and was going out in the town as a teenager, and it represented his joy. And it's like you're taking back stuff that you've repressed, and you put it inside you, and people have tangible experience feeling this thing inside them.
Interesting.
And then it spreads around.
Mm-hmm.
And we ask them to spread it all the way through their body. And sometimes people do it themselves if they're good meditators and they're comfortable. And sometimes they ask me to walk them through it. And I sometimes have a harder time with that with Zoom, because I used to always look at the whole, look at their body parts as I was telling them to spread it around.
Uh-huh.
And now I have to do something else. But I'm usually pretty good, although once in a while I get the thighs and the calves mixed up.
You need one of those little, those little anatomy dolls.
Oh, there you go.
That you can just have sitting under your computer, and then you can look at that.
Yeah, exactly. But it's an amazing process. This technique is what got that woman over her 20-year depression.
Mm-hmm.
People have amazing things, and it used to take hours one step would take 2 hours. It took as much as 2 hours doing it the more traditional way that other people had. But I do have this knack for compressing things. And
that's good. You got to get right to the point, right?
Well, that's how I am. If you'd ever been in a meeting with me, I would get people to the point, because I just, I don't have the patience. But also, it just worked. Mm-hmm. It just occurred to me. Things were like happening anyway. Mm-hmm. So, but the step-by-step process is in the Defy Trauma course. And people are having like extraordinary experiences. I had one woman in New Zealand who wrote me a whole bunch of emails about the things that were happening to her when she was doing the course. And she got over like anxiety from 30 years worth of anxiety in just from the book. Mm-hmm. But then doing the course, people have she was having extraordinary experiences. But I was a little jealous. Part of me is really excited that I have this course where I don't have to be there, because I told you how exhausted I get from these sessions. Mm-hmm. But I have this really, really specific way of working that's unlike anybody else's. But there's only one of me. And eventually I want to teach people how to do it, but I need more people to hear of it and be interested in it before I can. I've taught one person, and she's having really profound results with people. That's great. This woman, so one of the things I sometimes do is have people imagine a guide, an ally. And again, it could be the celebrity, it could be someone and blah, blah, whatever. But they have this, and she had an ally. She had been adopted, and she knew something about her grandmother. Apparently her grandmother just was trying to force her daughter to have an abortion, and there were some terrible, terrible things that happened. And her ally, and secrets get revealed all the time through this work. It's really weird. But her ally said, she had a child that she lost, like at 6 months. And the woman who bought the course said, well, that's not true. But she happened to look it up, and she discovered this woman lost a 6-month-old child, and that's why she was so horrible to her daughter when she got pregnant, and horrible about the adoption and things like that. But weird things, people discover all kinds of things. I had a 75-year-old man whose mom had come home on a gurney when he was 3 years old, and all these people were assisting and all these other things, and nobody ever explained to him what the issue was with his mother. And this had affected him. He was 75, so for 72 years. And he suddenly knew that she had an illegal abortion back in the days, when it was coat hangers and things like that. So there was that. I had another guy who his father was mentally ill, and his mother stayed married to him anyway, and was kind of killing herself with drink by staying married to him. And he discovered that the reason she stayed married to him was that everybody in her family told her not to marry this guy in the first place. Mm. And she was too embarrassed to leave him. And that's what kept her together, which led to, he wound up in foster homes after she died and things like that. So that was, but it's really weird, because how would you know? It's like we know these things. These things just show up. We just have these knowings that you don't know why you know it. But there's this interconnection.
Mm-hmm.
There's some part of us that knows things that we should never know. I mean, this woman in New Zealand, having this information come to her was really amazing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so the more you connect to your subconscious mind through your body or through your imagination, the more likely you are to have the experiences that you'll get the information that you need to know. It may be a drip process. It's a little bit at a time, but the things that happen, if they're still affecting you, when you get rid of the leftover physical tension, the leftover emotions, the negative self beliefs, your life gets so much better. It can be little by little. It can be a lot. With the if people who do sessions with me, we have really, if they're right, if they're able to do some of this work, when most people are, but not, or if you also have to be willing to go where you need to go, which is why I like working with people with anxiety and trauma, because they really are willing to go there, and depression as well. But it's really profound transformations for as far as you're willing to go, because we're not always willing to we're not always ready for the next step.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes we are, sometimes we're not. My ex, so not to be depressive and trigger warning if you have issues around sexual abuse, my ex-wife, her father, she had no idea she had been molested. But her father came in and apologized to her for molesting her 4 times when she was a teenager, and while she was sleeping. And we talked about this for a dozen years. Well, more than a dozen years, probably 15 years. And whenever she'd mention her dad, I would see my grandfather, and they had similar bodies, but their faces were nothing alike. And so I would ask myself, did my grandfather molest me? Did my grandfather molest me? I asked a few times and got no, 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 no. 2012, on my birthday, I'm talking to my wife, and I suddenly saw his face flash, and I knew that he had molested me as an infant. And then that was the beginning of discovering all these other things. Mm-hmm. But for 15 years, I didn't know that. Even though I was like digging, you know what I mean? Yeah, like, you're digging for gold and there's no gold there. Mm-hmm. But there is. It just, it wasn't time. So everything in its own, people are ready when they're ready. But if you're in pain, if there's something difficult going on, if you're in relationships that are painful to be in, or you're running away from relationships that are good, if you have a big procrastination issue. I didn't know I had anxiety. I thought I had procrastination. And then I bought this book on healing anxiety through hypnosis, and all of a sudden I realized I bought the book for me, not for all the clients I was going to. And then using their stuff, I created my own stuff that was even more effective and more interesting. And then so if you have something that's not working, that you're dissatisfied with in your life, and you're willing to entertain the idea that there's some old pain that you're carrying, that you may already know things that happened to you, but talk therapy doesn't cure things. Mm-hmm. Talk therapy is about eventually having an aha moment. But when it's rare in a glorious event, whereas like an EMDR or somatic experiencing, or the stuff I do, is about, let's go straight for this, what's buried in our subconscious mind, what we're carrying in our implicit memory, and really work deeply that way. So then you're going to find something that, and because you're going straight for the gold, you have a transformative experience each time. Mm-hmm. Because it's possible. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, have you ever had anyone regret starting with hypnotherapy because they found something out that they had repressed?
No, I haven't had that. I haven't had. Yeah, no, people have known. I mean, people have been surprised.
Mm-hmm.
But when you work with it, there's a lot of peace. Well, maybe there's. I mean, she already knew. There was one woman who cried really hard during our
Mm-hmm.
sessions. Uh, her husband had brain surgery, and it opened up memories of trauma for her. And the easy things I do, it wasn't easy for her. I mean, most people don't ugly cry during a set. I mean, almost like 99.9% of the people I work with, you're going to have tears maybe coming out of the sides of your eye while you're going through something. You're not screaming. I will say, F you, Dad, you don't get to blank. And I'll have you do it in the deepest part of your voice with some intensity, not super loud, just sometimes a little louder than you might. But
more forceful.
It's really,
yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I used to do therapy where you screamed all the time, and I'd have laryngitis 3 days out of every week for 6 months at a time, and this is with the hypnotic visual, with what I call it somatic visualization, right? You're visualizing something, but it's fully connected to your body, just like you experienced when you unzipped your back and you started pulling the rocks out. That was a visualization, but there was also feeling connected to it, and you're releasing feeling. So the idea of releasing as much tension out of your body that you're carrying, the more you can do that. And it improves your health too. I mean, I've had people who didn't come to me for pain management who said, oh my God, this is the first time I've been out of back pain for 3 years. Because we carry the tension of the repressed emotions. It cuts off our blood flow. It tenses up our muscles. And this stuff makes it easier.
Yeah.
The more you heal from your past, the more comfortably you walk in life.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And all of this is really interesting. I love seeing all of the connections to EMDR and talk therapy and just everything and meditation. I think it's really cool. If you had chosen a different path instead of becoming a hypnotherapist, what would you be doing instead?
Well, I wanted to write musical theater.
Ah.
I wanted to write musicals. I've been in rooms with Stephen Sondheim. I had a year with Maury Eston, who wrote Nine and stuff like that. I have friends with Tony Awards. And I actually moved from Santa Cruz to Berkeley. I was writing a one-man musical called Waltzing on Marshmallows about my quest for a mystical vision during something called the harmonic convergence, where an astrological alignment where people were supposed to have experiences that were 20 years ahead of where they were. And I did wind up having a vision at the end of that. That was about 20 years ahead of where I was. Because 20 years later, I suddenly had this understanding that I didn't have from back then. So yeah, and I used to love it. And or director, producer, or something. But I love writing musical theater songs.
Yeah, that's really cool. I was not expecting that. I mean, I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't that. That's great. So it's time for the magic moment of the streams. I have this magic wand here. Oh no. Well, it used to light up. I don't know why it's not lighting up. I have a magic wand here. If you could wave this magic wand and eliminate one common opinion or misconception or theory surrounding mental illness, disabilities, you're talking about mental health, what would you eliminate today?
Well, what I would do is I would actually teach people to connect to what's underneath whatever they're upset about. When people get triggered, the process I use, everybody can do. You can just notice if you're upset with somebody, notice where you feel it in your body. Ask yourself how old you were, who you were with, and then let yourself just release it with like a fire hose or a magician's hat. And that changes, Putin would probably not be going to war in Ukraine if he were, realized what he was really triggered about. That's what I would
Wouldn't that
change.
be nice?
Yeah.
That's great. Well, I'm going to post your socials one more time. So if y'all are interested in connecting with Mahesh offline or away from this stream, feel free to check out any of these. The 1 Minute Anxiety Solution website, Defy Trauma course, and the Berkeley Hypnosis website are all right there. He's Mahesh Grow on Instagram and TikTok. If anybody has any...
Anxiety123.com has everything.
Okay.
It's as easy as 123. Anxiety123.com.
Perfect. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to pop them into the chat as well, and we'll ask them. But Mahesh, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm just going to turn it over to you and say if there's any other resources or things that we didn't talk about that you want to talk through. I'll just hand the stage to you for a little bit.
Well, we got everything. And the big thing is, look, if you don't have money and you don't want to spend money on anything, go to TikTok. Follow me at TikTok. Follow me at I am sharing my heart on those places. And I'm sharing ways to lower anxiety. I'm showing ways to deal with trauma, ways to love yourself unconditionally on those spots. If you have some money, get the ebook. It's only $17. It's the 1 Minute Anxiety Solution. It gives you 57 instant ways to lower anxiety. And of course, if any of this sounded appealing and you really want to work directly with me, you can, if you go to anxiety123.com, that will take you to where you can set up a free consultation with me.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Mahesh. I really appreciate your time and energy being here with us today.
My pleasure. It was a treat to get to talk to you.
Absolutely. That's it for today's episode of Even Tacos Fall Apart, where we explored the fascinating world of hypnotherapy and its potential benefits for anxiety, trauma, and depression. I hope this episode has provided valuable insights and practical tips for understanding how hypnotherapy can be used as a complementary therapy to improve mental health and well-being. I also hope it has shed light on how hypnotherapy can help individuals access the deeper layers of their mind to address mental and physical health concerns. Remember, hypnotherapy is not a magic cure for mental illness, but it can be a powerful tool to help individuals on their healing journey. It's important to seek out a qualified and experienced hypnotherapist and to approach this form of therapy with an open mind and a willingness to participate actively in the process. I invite you to continue the conversation on hypnotherapy and mental health by sharing your thoughts and experiences with me on social media or through our website, tacosfallapart.org. And if you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review or rating on your favorite podcast platform. It makes a huge difference. Until next time, remember that even tacos fall apart and we still love them. Thank you for listening and take care.